At our 50th anniversary party, my husband lifted a champagne glass, smiled at 200 guests, and announced he was leaving me for a woman younger than our youngest daughter. Then he leaned close enough for only me to hear, and said I would get nothing because of a prenuptial agreement I had never seen in my life. People laughed nervously, thinking it was some cruel joke from an aging man with bad taste. But I didn't know that within weeks, a lawyer's letter and a stack of bank statements would turn his golden celebration into a public unraveling. If you enjoy quiet revenge and elegant justice, stay with me. This one took patience, paper trails, and a man who underestimated the woman who had done his taxes for 30 years. My name is Clara Whitmore. I was 79 years old when my husband decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. I'm a retired high school history teacher, the kind who color-coded essays, kept carbon copies of every important letter, and believed dates matter because facts matter. I spent 41 years teaching teenagers that empires fall when arrogance outruns judgment. At home, I balanced checkbooks, saved warranty cards, and labeled family photo boxes by year and holiday. I was calm by nature, not because life had been easy, but because noise rarely helps the truth. People often mistake calm women for passive women. They confuse silence with surrender. That was Harold's first mistake. In our marriage, Harold had always liked an audience. At 40, he bought a red convertible we couldn't afford and parked it in the school lot so everyone would ask about it. I was the one who quietly paid down the credit card after he got bored with the attention. He called himself a visionary. I called him expensive. 10 years later, when he retired from commercial real estate, he still introduced me at dinner parties as my dear Clara, who keeps us all organized. It sounded flattering until you heard the tone. He meant I handled the boring things while he handled the glamorous ones. Guests would laugh. I would smile and refill water glasses. By our late 70s, the pattern had hardened. Harold loved admiration. I loved order. He collected handshakes and compliments. I kept records, renewal notices, and copies of every property tax filing. He assumed that made me small. In truth, it made me dangerous. The anniversary party was held at the Lakeside Pavilion, a place with white columns, polished wood floors, and enough soft candlelight to make betrayal look almost elegant. Our daughters had organized it, or so I believed. There were framed photos from our wedding, a string quartet, and a 5-tier cake with sugar roses. 50 years. Half a century of birthdays, mortgages, funerals, report cards, and one husband who thought longevity was the same as loyalty. I wore a navy dress and my mother's pearl earrings. Harold wore a tuxedo and the expression of a man preparing a performance. I noticed a blonde woman near the back of the room before he spoke. She was in her 50s, sleek and smiling too familiarly at my husband. I assumed she was someone's guest. Then Harold tapped his fork against a champagne flute. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, he said, smiling broadly. 50 years is a long time. Long enough, in fact, to know when a chapter should end. A few people chuckled. I did not. He turned toward me and laid a hand over his heart like an actor in a dinner theater production. Clara, you've been a loyal companion, but I've decided I deserve some happiness while I still can. Then he beckoned the blonde woman forward. This is Denise. The room changed temperature. Denise stepped beside him, all smooth hair and polished nails, and Harold actually took her hand. One of my daughters dropped her napkin. My sister-in-law gasped loud enough to cut through the string quartet. Harold leaned down toward me and said, so softly nobody else could hear, don't make a scene. The prenup covers everything. You get nothing. That's when I looked him in the eyes and understood something simple. He had mistaken shock for defeat. I was 79, retired, and living mostly on a teacher's pension and Social Security. Our home was paid off, but only because I had insisted on extra payments for years. Most of our savings, investments, and rental income were in accounts Harold managed, or, more accurately, accounts he wanted everyone to believe he managed alone. If his claim about a prenuptial agreement were true, I could lose the house, the retirement cushion I had spent decades building, and the sense of dignity older women are too often expected to surrender quietly. There was something else at stake, too. Our daughters. Families don't just fracture on paper. They split down the middle of memory. If Harold controlled the story, I would become the bitter old wife standing in the way of his late-in-life happiness. He would turn betrayal into reinvention and call it bravery. But I didn't know how sloppy he had become, not yet. 3 days after the party, a courier delivered a large envelope. Inside was a letter from Harold's attorney, cold and polished, stating that my husband intended to file for divorce immediately. Tucked behind it was a photocopy of what they claimed was a prenuptial agreement signed before our wedding in 1976. The signature looked like mine at first glance, if my name had been written by someone trying to imitate me while standing on a moving train. There was also a handwritten note from Harold on expensive cream stationery. Take the guest cottage title and be sensible. It's more than generous. The guest cottage sat on a narrow parcel behind one of our old rentals, a drafty little structure with plumbing issues and no independent road access. In other words, a legal nuisance wrapped in fake generosity. He was threatening me with nothing, then presenting a worthless scrap as mercy. When my neighbor Jean came by with soup, she read the letter and pressed her lips together. He thinks you'll panic. I folded the papers carefully. He thinks I'll be embarrassed. And are you? I set the note back in the envelope. No, I'm offended. That was the beginning. 4 months later, Harold was living in a condominium downtown with Denise, wearing open-collar linen shirts and pretending he had become a new man because he had changed zip codes. I stayed in the house, watered the roses, met with my attorney, and let the truth gather weight. The next morning after my fourth meeting with counsel, I opened the cedar file chest in my study and started pulling tax returns from the last 15 years. I already had the basics organized: joint filings, rental income, property depreciation schedules, charitable contributions. Harold liked to claim loudly at galas but forgot I had documented line by line. That's when a tiny inconsistency began to itch at me. 3 years of returns listed interest income from one institution. 7 years later, that institution was gone, replaced by another. But the totals on our marital disclosures were lower than the historical patterns suggested they should be. Not wildly lower, just enough for a careless spouse to miss. I was not careless. My attorney, Miriam Holt, was the kind of woman who could dismantle a lie with a stapler and a legal pad. She listened while I laid out the returns, then requested full bank production through formal discovery. Harold resisted, of course. Men with secrets always call transparency harassment. Then my phone rang. It was a junior clerk from a regional bank branch, where Harold and I had once held a certificate of deposit. He couldn't discuss much, but he said a forwarding request had been attached to an old account in a way that created document confusion with our discovery packet. He suggested our attorney request corrected statements for all linked accounts, including archived ones. He sounded nervous, as if he understood he was brushing against something improper without quite naming it. Miriam moved fast. A week later, the corrected production arrived in 3 bankers' boxes. I still remember the smell of paper and dust when we opened them in her conference room. Statements, wire confirmations, cashier's check images, beneficiary designations, transfer authorizations. Harold had assumed age would slow me down. Instead, retirement had given me time. We found a hidden brokerage account first, not hidden from the government exactly, hidden from me. It had been opened 9 years earlier under a revocable trust name Harold never mentioned, funded through small periodic transfers from rental income and proceeds from the sale of one commercial parcel. The amounts were carefully sized to avoid attracting attention on our household books. Then came the real insult. Over 18 months, that account had transferred substantial sums to Denise under labels like consulting reimbursement, design retention, and property staging fees. Denise was not a consultant. She sold luxury skincare online and posted filtered photographs from hotel balconies. There were also cashier's checks used to make the down payment on the condominium where Harold now lived with her. Miriam tapped one statement with the back of her pen. This is marital money. I looked at the columns, the dates, the signatures. I know. There was more. The supposed prenuptial agreement used my married name instead of my maiden name in one section, even though it claimed to predate the wedding. The notary stamp belonged to a county office that had changed formats years after the alleged signing date, and Harold's witness was a man who had died 8 months before the document was supposedly executed. That's when the humiliation of the party transformed into something cleaner. Not rage, precision. Miriam advised me not to confront Harold privately, which was wise. Men who build fantasy lives often become reckless when reality enters the room. So we arranged a formal settlement conference at her office. Neutral territory, watering glass pitchers, leather chairs, a long table built for discomfort. Harold arrived in a navy blazer, suntanned and irritated, with Denise waiting in the lobby like an accessory. He still believed charisma could bend facts. His attorney looked tired before we even began. Harold sat down and gave me a pitying smile. "Clara, this can still be civilized." Miriam slid a folder across the table. "It can. That depends on whether your client prefers settlement or testimony." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I opened my own binder and spoke evenly. "It means the prenup is fraudulent. It means the hidden trust account is documented. And it means the transfers to Denise were made with marital assets." For the first time in 50 years, Harold looked genuinely unsure. "That's ridiculous," he said. "Denise worked for me." Miriam didn't raise her voice. "On what, exactly?" Harold glanced toward the door as if the answer might be standing outside in heels. "She advised me." I folded my hands. "On how to move my money into her condominium." His attorney stiffened. Harold turned pink at the collar. "Clara," he said, trying for wounded dignity, "you're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate." That's when Miriam placed the forged prenuptial agreement beside the notary records and death certificate of the supposed witness. Then she set down the bank statements showing the transfers, highlighted in yellow, followed by the cashier's check image for the condo deposit. Harold stared at the page too long. His attorney exhaled slowly. "Harold, did you inform me about this account?" Silence. "Harold?" he muttered. It wasn't relevant. Miriam answered for him. "The court may disagree." Then the door opened and Denise herself stepped halfway in, clearly unable to tolerate being excluded from the drama. "Harold, how much longer?" She stopped when she saw the papers. I turned my head and looked at her once, politely. "You may want independent counsel." That landed. Court did not happen in one dramatic afternoon. Justice, in real life, is slower and often more satisfying because of it. There were hearings, sworn declarations, amended disclosures, forensic accounting reports, and one very stern judge who did not appreciate manufactured documents. The fake prenuptial agreement fell apart first. Miriam's document expert traced multiple inconsistencies in the paper stock, the notarial format, and the signature pressure. The judge referred to it as facially unreliable before the second hearing was over. Harold's expression when those words entered the record was worth every sleepless night. Then the financial side collapsed on him. The hidden trust account was declared marital property. The transfers to Denise were classified as dissipation of marital assets. That simple legal phrase, dissipation, did more damage to Harold than any shouting ever could. It translated his fresh start into what it really was, siphoning shared money into an affair while threatening his wife with nothing. The condo down payment became traceable. The reimbursement labels were exposed as fiction. Denise, who had once smiled through my golden anniversary party as if she were inheriting a crown, suddenly had to explain why tens of thousands of dollars had landed in her accounts with no real invoices, contracts, or tax treatment to support them. That was the twist she never saw coming. She thought she was the romantic ending. In court, she became Exhibit 14. Then my phone rang one rainy Tuesday afternoon while I was trimming lavender by the walk. It was Miriam. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. "We have the ruling." I sat down right there on the porch step. The settlement was decisive. I kept the marital home. I received a substantially larger share of liquid assets to offset Harold's concealment and misconduct. The court ordered restitution for the funds transferred to Denise and awarded attorney's fees tied to the fraud and non-disclosure. Some assets had to be liquidated. Harold's bluff had cost him dearly. He did not leave that marriage richer. He left it documented. As for Denise, she vanished from photographs, social circles, and eventually the condominium. It turns out romance wilts quickly when subpoenas arrive. 8 months after the ruling, I had the house repainted, the study windows restored, and the old dining room turned into a reading room with floor-to-ceiling shelves. I kept my mother's china, sold the silver Harold never polished, and donated half his monogrammed barware without a second thought. Peace is lighter than performance. I recommend it. My daughters came back slowly, each carrying her own shame for freezing at that anniversary party. I never demanded apologies in dramatic speeches. I asked for honesty, and in time, I got it. We have Sunday lunches now. Real ones, no speeches, no champagne toasts from men who confuse attention with love. Harold still exists somewhere in town, of course. Men like him always do. I'm told he complains that I turned everything legal, as if the betrayal had been poetic until I handed it to a judge. As if his affair was sophisticated but my evidence was impolite. But I didn't know, on that terrible night under the string lights, that humiliation could be so temporary, or that dignity, once defended, grows back stronger than before. At 79, I did not get younger, prettier, louder, or crueler. I got clearer. I learned that revenge does not have to shout to be complete. Sometimes it arrives in bankers' boxes, properly indexed, with tabs along the side and the truth highlighted in yellow. Moral: never let someone weaponize your age, your calm, or your loyalty against you. A lie can glitter at a party, but it rarely survives a paper trail. And when someone says you get nothing, make sure a judge gets the full file. Tell me in the comments, what detail gave Harold away first for you? And subscribe for more family drama stories where betrayal meets elegant justice.